Let's watch the Vaush Libertarian debate. I actually really like Vaush. Vaush is like a cool dude, but he just has a really bad philosophy.
This was more of a very rough, I think, edit.
Colton King, objectivism. Where do I start? Start with existence.
At any point, if I step in, it's basically going to be to try to ask a guiding question. Just if I think this might be some way more productive. If you guys want to stay on whatever line you're on, just say so, and I'll shut up. I don't think it's any issue with it. And really, the person actually responded that was very well done. So, yeah.
That capitalism is preferable to certain other economic systems, but I do believe that at this point there are clear and obvious alternatives that would be more moral.
A clear and obvious alternative that would be more moral than the current system of capitalism would be actual capitalism. So I agree that there's better systems available.
Okay. Just for clarity here, I'm not trying to pin you in or anything like this, but you would say that capitalism is immoral, right? Not just there's a better option, but it is itself immoral, correct?
I try to avoid using really hard binary language like that because everything is relative to something else,
See, this dude, this Adam Kokesh dude is doesn't understand morality at all. He's a fucking libertarian, but he's moral, immoral. Do you think capitalism's immoral? And then Vaush is oh, I don't believe in morality. And then now he's fucking confused because he doesn't know how to argue against these moral things that Vaush is saying here. He doesn't know how to argue against the fact that, or against Vaush's argument that morality isn't real, or I don't believe in moral claims.
Even for...
Oh yeah, ALR, you're good. I misread the quote.
For example, a shitty parent is probably preferable to living on the street. I would say that at this point in time, the decision to stick with capitalism is an immoral one, because there are obvious ways in which we can improve on that system to deliver a better outcome.
Such as more capitalism.
May I take a stab at an opening statement of definitions?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am first and foremost a voluntarist. I believe that all human relations should be voluntary, free of force, fraud, and coercion. This is the foundation of libertarian ethics. And this is what I would define as a concept of morality, a unified theory of ethics based on the idea that as an independent consciousness in your own physical vessel, you own yourself, and therefore it is wrong to initiate force against you.
This is so stupid. So cringe.
This is such or aggression or violence or coercion or anything of that nature that deprives you of the rights.
The 5G's giving me corona.
Incumbent with that self-ownership. And the definition of capitalism that I would use here is basically concurrent with that, because the definition of capitalism from a textbook is an economic system based on ownership of the means of production. And this gets generally misrepresented by misdefining the means of production with a focus on industrial resources as opposed to the ultimate means of production, which is the individual human being, the individual mind and body capable of creating value that is measured not in widgets or in dollars, but in human happiness and quality of life. And so within this framework where I would say that capitalism is this overarching system, which is the only ethical system that anything...
Capitalism's an ethical system now?
Here describes a state of ethics. If a society is unethical, it means that someone's rights are being violated, which means their self-ownership.
Oh my god, this is so... this is not how you defend capitalism, with this whole... Capitalism is the morality and self-ownership because I own myself, and no, you have to have a moral system first. You have to say every individual has a right to pursue his own life and make his own decisions with his life and to pursue his own happiness. And because of that, We need the system of capitalism that allows each individual to pursue his own happiness, pursue his own life. And I mean, this is easy to argue against.
Is being violated, which means that a proper capitalist system of full ownership of the means of production is not being respected. So within that framework of voluntarism as capitalism, you could have a system that looks like something else. You could, and I use this in my messaging even now, running for president on the localization platform of dissolving the federal government, that if you want, and I go to the extremes with this, so forgive the little sidebar here, but if you're for me as someone of Jewish descent, Jews will not replace us is viscerally disturbing. But if there are people in this country who want an ethno-state and they form it on private property voluntarily, they don't hold anybody captive and they don't force it on anybody else, as disgusting as I think that is, I want them to have that right. This is the modern equivalent of, I disagree with what you have to say, but I will fight for to the death for your right to say it. And on the flip side, if you're a gun-grabbing socialist who wants to live in a nudist commune in the woods, as long as you're not forcing it on anybody else, I want you to have that right too. I wouldn't live in either place. And if you say, well, we're forming it voluntarily, but we're going to call, if you're doing it with,
let's get to Vaush's arguments.
Anything that violates today.
Excuse me. Yeah, so I'll try to address as much of that as I can with, I guess, my own opening statement. So, surprise, surprise, I'm a libertarian too. I'm a libertarian socialist. Libertarianism's ideological
Yeah, libertarianism's fucking cringe.
roots can be found largely in the product of leftist thinkers, after all, because it was leftists who originally concerned themselves with the idea of human emancipation. I place a very high priority on human liberty, the ability for people to act independent of coercion, with full autonomy, to prevent them from being stymied or withheld by institutions more powerful than them. I do think...
But then force business owners to make their businesses cooperatives and force business owners to redistribute their wealth. Yeah, all very free liberty, all very free.
That on a fundamental level, human beings are all equal. I mean, sure, we vary in individual ways, but in a principle moral sense, we are all equal. And I look upon systems which divide...
Equality is not a value.
And place into...
We're not all equal. If I achieve more than you, I get more money than you, and I deserve that. If I create a business and produce all this value, if I create Amazon's amazing. You know how many books I've bought from Amazon lately? Holy crap. Amazon is incredible. I don't have to go out to Barnes & Noble and catch the coronavirus. I can just catch the coronavirus from the packaging on Amazon instead, or from my 5G phone that creates the exosomes in me.
Hierarchies, human beings with great suspicion. I believe that capitalism is such a system. I think that capitalism, by way of its internal economic mechanisms, effectively necessitates a hierarchy that exists between those who own the means of production and those who do not. There are other smaller, less consequential hierarchies, the difference, for example, between a poor man and a rich man, but in the most egregious one of all is, without a doubt, the difference between those who control your labor and those who must sell their labor to survive.
What a weird way to look at this sort of thing. You're just entering a voluntary agreement. You see, oh, I can't go out and make my own things, but this dude, he went out and created this business, so now I see that he needs labor, so it's like, oh, I'll go help him out. I'll go work for him, and he'll pay me this money, and I'll help him out with his job, with what he's trying to create. I mean, this is not some immoral hierarchical structure where he's forcing people to work for him and work for these low wages. You can always go create your own business.
That's the issue that I take primarily. I don't like framing self-ownership in literal terms. For example, I wouldn't be comfortable with the idea of a human being selling themselves into slavery. If you own yourself, it follows logically that you can do anything.
Well, you'd stop them. I don't define the concept of self-ownership, but you can do what you want with yourself. The concept of self-ownership is incoherent because you can't own yourself. Like, it's incoherent to say that you are like the owner of something that is yourself. Like, property is something sort of external to you. It's sort of incoherent to say, like, oh, property rights are derived from me owning myself. That's just weird. That's really weird. Like, I have the right to my life, I have the right to my liberty, I have my right to think freely, act freely because of that, and property comes as a result to keep the rewards of my actions.
With yourself, if you want, it's your property, and you can, if you want, sell a piece of your property to another person without any expectation of getting it back. But I think there's something different about a human being, about consciousness and about self-actualization, that means ownership can't really apply consequentially to what we describe as sort of a human experience. So ultimately, my contention would be that
Sure, I mean, there's a lot of problems with self-ownership.
a person who believes in freedom.
But you really could sell yourself into slavery. I don't have a problem with that, so to speak. Like, if you wanted to sell yourself into slavery, I mean, that's your opportunity to do so. Hold up, I'm getting my name called. I'm gonna take a little break quick, and then I'll come back. I'm gonna get some food, probably. But I'll be right back. Don't leave. Please don't leave. Please stay here. Please communicate in the chat more and have some fun, my friends.
A person who believes in egalitarianism, a person who believes in the right for human beings to operate independent of outside external forces influencing their life, often to a negative extent. These people should believe in socialism.
Shalom.
Because only through socialism can we destroy the class divide that imposes that hierarchy upon us.
Oh, man. I don't know where to start there.
It's all right. We got all the time in the world.
We can get into this being a matter of market preferences and definitions, but I think what I want to get at first then is your definition of capitalism, because I think you skipped that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I define capitalism, I think I use a pretty standard definition, as an economic system where individuals have the legal right to own property and produce capital.
Yo, for real, boneless wings are trash. Boneless wings are just basically chicken nuggets dipped in barbecue sauce. Oh, man, I got some hot wings, though.
They would. It doesn't have to come from, like, the patrician of a state. And what's more...
Have y'all had the mango habanero wings from Buffalo Wild Wings? I love the taste, but them boys are hot.
That property rights are defended by the state to ensure the ability for the individual to control private property. That's what I consider to be capitalism. Of course, there are different types. Mercantile capitalism existed before the Industrial Revolution, and that was mostly done by...
Hold on. As a libertarian who understands the connection of voluntarism and anarchism, wouldn't you consider the existence of the state a violation of capitalism? That if there is a hit on even property protection services, that you don't have...
No, you need a state for capitalism. This is cringe. This dude's terrible.
...market in that area. So it's at least partially occluded capitalism when you have a state enforcing property rights, which is not what I would advocate for, and something I would say would be unethical because that state represents a coercive monopoly.
Well, 2 points to that. For one, no. Capitalism requires a state because only a central authority can defend property rights. After all, if we didn't have a state...
Okay, hold on. No, that's... okay, see...
Wait. Second point as well.
With that,
wait. It's okay. Write it down. I just want to say the second thing as well.
Yeah.
And secondly...
You take notes.
Even if that was the case, that the absence of a state bolstered capitalism, which I don't believe to be the case, I would say the abolition of the state in our society... I am an anarchist. I don't like states. But the abolition of our state in the society in which we exist now would not bring about positive outcomes. It would be highly destructive.
A state is necessary. We need government. We need a government. Okay. What's weird is these two are both fundamentally anarchists. They just have different philosophies.
Okay, you said that only a state can defend property rights, and I think that just flies in the face.
Well, he's right on that.
Case of observable reality, where individuals defend property rights by assertion, by consensus, by mutual respect.
Oh, I got a super
by social standards.
And that was Vaush, wasn't it? Yep, sorry. I thought I was.
And by private physical defense, as we would describe it today, in so many ways that are actually more effective than government. I mean, why do you not go around stealing stuff, even as someone who not you personally, but why would someone who might be tempted by desperation or greed or whatever to go around and steal stuff not do it? government is not an effective deterrent on any kind of large scale to prevent that theft. And government itself is, I think you would agree, largely and I would say by definition, a mechanism of
Government's better at responding to those things, though.
theft. So why would you say that if defending property rights is a virtuous thing, as I would if you include in that certainly self-ownership and civil rights, then why would you want the state to have the monopoly, or why would you say that the state is the best mechanism of achieving that?
So a few points there. I don't like framing the idea that what the government does is theft, because theft is fundamentally a legal definition. By definition, like...
This is such a dumb argument. Like, we're not saying, oh, it's theft because it's illegal. No, it's obviously legal. We agree with that. It's legal. I mean, I'm not a libertarian, but like, I believe taxation is theft, but just name the word different. I feel like with the concept of theft, forcefully taking is implied by that concept.
Stuff like taxation cannot be theft, because theft
Okay,
is
so what do you
something
call
which
it
is
then?
described. Well, it's a system of wealth expropriation, but theft is a specific legal definition. I think it's a little bit reductive to describe any time any resource changes hand from one group to another as a form of theft. But with regards to
But if it changes coercively, if it's taken, so you said it's appropriation, then what would be your umbrella term? Because I think most libertarians say theft includes robbery and fraud and appropriation and extortion. That all of those things are under the umbrella term theft. What's your umbrella term?
Well, we do consent to being taxed. There are things that we can do if we don't
Where's my social contract, boys?
want to be taxed, but I would use the term appropriation, generally speaking.
I don't think you consent to be taxed if in the exercise of your.
ALR, when will you read Spinoza? I actually have a book by Spinoza, but I'm going to read more Ayn Rand before I read Spinoza.
Natural rights.
Wait,
Something is taken from you.
Yeah, you do. You could just leave the country.
Oh, so I can't or secede? Am I allowed?
That's so stupid.
I mean, I know under your world I'd be allowed to secede, right?
Well, there wouldn't be a state in my world, so I mean, I don't know if there'd be anything to secede from, but I mean, if you want, you can leave the country, or if you really want, you don't get taxed if you don't have an income. If you want, you can just live off welfare. You don't have to. You don't have to do anything that gets.
This is so dumb. If you do anything, if you create anything, the government forcefully injects itself into your life. Like that's obviously a use of force. You're just born here, and they insert themselves into your life. Like, it's obviously an example of force. You shouldn't have to, like, move somewhere else to avoid someone inserting themselves into your life. You can move somewhere to find more things towards your life, but you shouldn't be forced to move somewhere by a government force.
It's you taxed by the government.
I think if you have a right to do something, and there is someone saying you can't do that without giving us money, your rights are being held hostage, and that would be a form of, I don't know if you want to say your legal definition, but certainly an umbrella term of theft.
So you're arguing that if there are basic things we should have access to, but if they're like kind of paywalled, or we have to like lose money or resources to get to them, it's unethical?
No. It's unethical for someone to use force, initiate force into your life, go into your life, and initiate force to take your stuff, or force you to do something against your will. It's very simple. You don't need to obfuscate these things.
I didn't follow all those definitions, but I think yes.
Well,
if I have a right to trade with my neighbor.
You see, he's going to that the wages theft argument here.
And the government says, or I have a right to start a business and sell something that I've produced. And the government says, well, you can do that, but you have to give us 10% of your profit. Then my right is being violated. That something that I am entitled to as the fruit of my labor is being stolen from me.
Okay, then this is something that we can completely agree on, because right now, in order to live a decent life, every person in this country has to work at a job, and that job...
Stop! I saw something beautiful in the chat just now. ALR started reading The Fountainhead. Everyone give him a hand. Everyone at home, just give ALR a hand. Let's go. We got him on board.
expropriates labor from them through their surplus value. That's how companies make profit. So I agree. Fundamentally, capitalism is unethical.
You just said people could live on. You just said people.
Wait, what is his
Job,
argument?
and that job now, in order to live a decent life, every person in this country has to work at a job, and that job
You don't have to work at a job. You can create your own business. I mean, but the reason that you do work at a job is because not everybody can create their own business, and because of that, we should be extra thankful to the people that create these jobs for us to have.
Creates labor from them through their surplus value. That's how companies make profit. So I agree.
That's not expropriating wealth. It's a voluntary agreement between a worker and a business owner.
Fundamentally, capitalism is unethical.
This is the whole wages theft meme, and it's so bad, so cringe.
People could live on. You just said people could live on welfare.
Well, people can live on welfare. So if you take contention with my argument, you also have to take contention with the mechanisms of capitalism. In both cases, people can, if they want, just live some subsistence lifestyle, but the higher order pleasures of life are gated behind a higher power, a corporation or a state, expropriating from you.
It's weird to call a corporation a higher power, because they get their power from choice. They get their power from voluntary transactions. The state doesn't get its power that way. Of course, a government's useful. We need a government. But that's not how the government gets its power. The government doesn't get its power through voluntary transactions. If it wants to do something economically, it has to use force. The government's good at force. The government's extremely good at force. So that's what we should restrict it to. But when they insert a gun into economics, that's when you get involuntary transactions and a lot of distortions.
So you are defining capitalism as state capitalism, and I'm defining capitalism as an anarcho-capitalist or a voluntarist would define capitalism.
Nothing that I've described wouldn't also apply in your ideal world.
Look, this dude can't argue with him. It's terrible. It's terrible. This Adam Kokesh guy cannot make these arguments. You can see that he's just retreating. He's not a philosophical dude. He can't explain this difference in what it means for something to be voluntary and this difference in force. Like, the government, when it steals your money, when it taxes you, it injects itself into your life. Like, you're just living your own life. You're pursuing your own happiness, and the government comes in and uses force on you as you're doing that. But the difference is with a company, you see that, oh, I'm alive. I need to maintain my life. I need to go make money. I need to go be productive to do certain things. Now, the first thing you can do is say, oh, I'll do this on my own. I'll go out, try to create a business, or I'll try to subsist and do whatever I need to do. Well, then you realize you can't do that necessarily. Not everybody can do that. So then you say, oh, I'll go work for this person that actually did do that and was successful at creating his own business, creating his own sort of thing, and I'll work for him. If he pays me a high enough wage, if he pays me higher than what I could do on my own, I'll go work for him. And that's fundamentally a moral system.
Well, in my ideal world, there would be no coercive or government-based mechanisms of property rights enforcement.
These wings are hot. It's like burning my tongue. It's tough. It's getting tough to talk, man. Holy crap. Mango habanero is hot stuff, though. Spicy stuff. You gotta love it. Huh? Defending AnCap. Oh, I'm not defending an AnCap. What do you mean?
What about corporate?
Wouldn't be necessary.
Corporate elements.
So, but here's where we are looking at the same problem. To your immediate question, corporate elements. What you say about you have to work a job where your labor is expropriated in order to maintain a decent quality of life. I mean, first of all, in the sense that you say you can opt out with welfare, certainly that's one way where you just blew a hole in your own argument. But then, for myself, for example,
how am I blowing a hole in my own argument?
You said you have to work to have a decent living, whereas just a minute before that you said you could opt out and live off welfare.
No, I'm sorry. Let me clarify. My argument just demolishes you.
Why is he defending welfare here? That's so stupid. Holy crap, you can't make... This dude's a terrible debater. Let me at Vaush. Let me debate Vaush. These are not tough arguments to make.
Your idea. You're making the argument.
These are fundamental arguments, and this dude cannot make the arguments. It's terrible. This dude, he's probably good at the higher level economic things when you have to debate statistics, but he's not good at philosophically. Philosophically, these libertarians are bankrupt.
argument that it's unethical for the government to tax you, even though you could avoid those taxes by living a subsistence lifestyle. I'm saying the exact same thing for corporations. Corporations expropriate your labor, and the only way to not live a subsistence lifestyle is to work for said corporation. In both cases, a higher power...
This is where you have to make a distinction between force and voluntary trade. Like, he's saying they're basically equivalent here. Like, his argument is that force is basically preventing you from reaching these higher levels of life without taking some action. Well, then reality is inherently forceful by that definition. Because to live, you have to go out and do things. You have to go out and... Like, let's say you're living on an island completely by yourself. Well, you have to get up and go crack some coconuts. I mean, are the coconuts forcing you to crack them open? No, that's such a retarded definition. Force is when someone inserts himself into your life and prevents you from doing something. Not when a business offers you a job.
Power, a corporation or a state, gatekeeps the pleasures of life behind your subservience to them. In either case, you're being cucked by something infinitely more powerful than you. No individual can stand up to a state. No individual can stand up to a corporation. But in both instances, it is through their exploitation that you are able to access many of the higher pleasures of life. That's the case whether or not a state is backing up the private property rights of a capitalist society or not.
Here we get to the crux of things then, because I would say this is a byproduct of the state being a coercive managerial.
We're at the crux of things, but he's just being more stupid here. Like, it's you can't argue for capitalism because he says that capitalism cannot have a state.
Agent in the economy. That corporatism that you described, that our inability to compete as individuals, to have our labor as a contribution to the economy properly valued, is an obvious product of the corporatism that we are living under today, where corporations have special powers, where individuals are disadvantaged, where a small business is at a disadvantage to compete with a big business every time, where banking interests and loan mechanisms create consolidations of wealth and power that are completely unnatural, and that in a flattened capitalist market without this gross concentration of wealth and power that is primarily centered around the phenomena of...
The mixed economy is bad, but a state as such does not cause the mixed economy.
Central banks, obviously backed up by government policy and coercion and tax systems and all of that. You would have the ability to compete and
these wings are so
as
tasty.
An individual, have your labor properly valued such that all of the problems you're pointing at with the current system go away.
This is the same fairy tale that I have told to me by every libertarian, that somehow the state is like making everything worse.
You're a
and if we just took away
libertarian.
the state. I'm a libertarian socialist. I recognize capitalism is also oppressive. You take a look at one hierarchy and say you don't like it, and then take a look at another one and say you actually quite do like it. I'm opposed to all forms of hierarchy.
No, because state capitalism creates unnatural hierarchies. Your definition, your concept of capitalism does that.
He agrees with his premise that hierarchy is bad. Hierarchy is not bad as such. We're not looking for equality here. This anti-hierarchy thing is very much comes from valuing equality too highly. And equality is not something that you need to value here. Equality is not this high value that we need to have.
What I'm defining
the goal is to get away from force. They replace force with hierarchy here. That's fundamentally what Vaush does, and that's his problem here.
Capitalism doesn't do that at all.
Yeah, but again, this has never been tested empirically, and there is no theory backing this up. Why exactly, in a world without a state that still has a capitalist society, would people suddenly be free from all of the implicit coercion inherent to a capitalist society? How exactly, and we didn't even get to this, how exactly do you back up private property rights without a state? No, there is coercion, because you still have to work to survive, unless you're saying there's a...
Vaush is right here. You need a state to back up private property rights. I hate to agree with Vaush on these things, but because he takes these to crazy extremes, but Vaush is right on that point. And if Kokesh was a libertarian, Vaush should not be able to make that point. Or not a libertarian, an objectivist, Vaush should not be able to make that point.
It's a robust UBI and no incentive whatsoever to work in an AnCap state or AnCap society.
No, of course you would not have a UBI.
Right, then you have to work, and in order to work and survive, you have to submit yourself to the will of an autocratic organization. Businesses are not democracies. You work there, and you will...
He's probably going to say you can create your own business, and that would be the right answer here. And Vaush doesn't know how to respond to that, really.
That's not necessarily true. No, that's not necessarily true, because in a world where there is no state-granted property right or corporatist or policy or banking system-based advantages, your labor as an individual is valued equally to everybody else's. That's part of the problem of the distortion of the current system. Independent contractor, you as an independent contractor can compete without being part of a bigger system.
Okay, wait, help me out.
Engage in barter, you can engage in trade for goods and services.
Every time I talk...
You can live off the land and create your own business like what I'm doing right now.
Just create your own business, and then other people have to work for that business. Every time I talk to an AnCap, like they fall back...
Sure, you can create your own business, then other people have to work for it. Sure, not everybody can create their own business. That's why we need to have people who create these businesses, that go out and create these things, and then have people work for them. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, you're just signing an independent contract, as he says, kind of. Like, you're just... Yeah, you're just making a voluntary agreement with other people. And that's... There's nothing wrong with that. There's no oppression in that. People are just agreeing to things, and you can leave that whenever. You don't have to make these agreements. You can create your own business. The fact is, there is a choice. With the government, there's not a choice. If you want to do something to survive, if you want to take actions to survive, the government's going to come in and use force on you, take your money, force you to do things a certain way. And yeah, and then if you want to survive as a business, if you want to survive, you don't need to work for a certain business. If you want to survive, you want to take the actions necessary to survive, you need to follow the government's rules. They force you to follow their rules, and they force you to pay taxes. And it's terrible. Has Adam Kokesh went full Georgist mode? Oh, Adam Kokesh is so cringe. I hate it.
Back in the same fairy tale about how, like, if we just got rid of the same fundamental principles of societal governance that have been working for thousands of years, suddenly everything will fall into place. Explain this to me. Wait, really quickly. I want this explained to me, like, individually.
No. I have to examine one of your premises here. No one else has to work for me. I have a shop in a shipping container where I can make geodesic dome frames.
So just everybody...
I can send them to people.
Okay.
And I can have a one-man business, and I can live very well if I want like
so
that.
So everybody just creates their own business?
Directly. The problem is that if
I mean, it's certainly possible for each person to create their own business. Everyone could have their own farm. Everyone could have their own little little YouTube channel. Like, I have my own business, technically. Like, I've done a lot of things that are very, like, creating my own business type thing. Like, I would mow lawns in my neighborhood a bunch. I would, what else? Mowing lawns, that'd be one thing. I created my own YouTube channel. Like, you can do things on your own. It's not hard to do. It's not hard to have a one-man sort of crew. But now for these higher level businesses like Amazon, for example, they obviously do need workers, and not everybody is going to feel like they should create their own business. Like, not everybody's John Gall. There's Eddie Willers out there who want to work for people, and it's good that these people can create these businesses. These virtuous men can create these businesses and provide these jobs to people, and yeah, that's a very virtuous thing. Brian, what's up? I'm listening to lo-fi hip-hop beats. Very beautiful stuff.
Enjoy the synergistic extra value of coming together with other people, whether it's through. Well, I mean, in a sense, with my business, I already am. Like, I get raw material, I get conduit from hardware stores and nuts and bolts through mail order, and I put those components together, and I create a product that's a geodesic dome frame that I can sell on the internet.
Let's take that. Let's take this from a base level, okay? So, on a fundamental level, in a capitalist society, you need to work to survive. Let's take the life of an average person, okay? Let's say you're born.
Yes, you need to take actions to survive. Yes. There's nothing wrong with that fact. Survival requires action. Yes, this is key. Like the fundamental alternative of life or death. Why do organisms act at all? Why should a living organism act at all? To live. And lack of action is death. Action is life. A lack of action is death. Yes. Anarcho-capitalism justification of self-ownership is pure sophistry. Yep, pessimistic idealism got something right. Let's go. But you know what else is pure sophistry? Saying that the self isn't consciousness.
Into a sort of well-off family, or let's just say middle class.
Got him.
Hold on a second.
Wait. I have to lay out premises before we can even discuss this. What?
Right. When you say have to work, do you mean have to work for someone else, or how would you extend this to like hunter-gatherer society?
Your labor has to be sold.
You have to work to survive.
You have, in order to make money, you have to sell your labor. Whether or not you have your own business or you're working for somebody else's, you have to sell your own labor, unless you own the labor of other people.
Would you guys mind if I jumped in real quick? So I know where you're going with this, Vaush, and I just want to direct this in a way that I think might help make things more clear with the arguments here. Vaush.
I feel bad for Vaush here. When moderators jump in, it's so cringe and it's terrible.
Like I think you touched on this loosely, but maybe you could do it more directly. Could you describe how you define coercion and then how the capitalist system is implicitly coercive?
Yeah.
I think that would help us get where we're...
Yeah, of course. Capitalism is implicitly... Well, I haven't even gotten to, like, the broader problems with capitalism because we're still focused on, like, the definition of coercion. But coercion is any instance in which an individual is compelled to act in a certain way due to forces that in some way, like, leverage stakes over them. So, for example, in a capitalist society, you do have to work or you have to own labor in order for you to be able to make money. And money is the tool that you use to live a fulfilling life. It's very difficult to live a fulfilling life with no money whatsoever. You could be Diogenes and jerk off in a barrel on the street all you want, but the cops are eventually going to show up and take you away. Money is kind of the baseline for existence in a capitalist society. The majority of people in this country right now are born into a certain economic class, and then they die in that same economic class. There's not a tremendous amount of class mobility. And what I'm curious about is...
If you want class mobility, you want capitalism.
How exactly this would change in a society without a state, because
and we need freedom for class mobility. We need freedom for that. We need people to be allowed to sort of move classes and create their own businesses and sort of compete out in the marketplace of the market. It's not as if there's this like equality has ever been achieved in any of these other systems. Capitalism has led to so much mobility compared to all these other systems that have ever been tried. Even socialism, which is supposed to be all about equality. But what happens is everyone just gets pulled down, and like basically what happens in socialism, everybody becomes a lower class because there's no like it's just the workers who decide everything, and rather than the great industrialists who create their businesses and the great minds of society.
This is what bothers me when I talk about this. It seems fantastical. There isn't any theory or any pragmatic demonstration of a state's removal serving to the benefit of the humans in that area. Usually when states fail and stop exerting law over their citizenry, we call that a failed state, and they're usually in a state of perpetual civil war. These are usually not enviable conditions. What it seems to me in an anarcho-capitalist society is that we would return fundamentally to feudalism. We've seen this happen before during the competing shogunates back during the Japanese feudal era, where dozens of clans would just organize their own economic and military forces. And
hey, Japan reminds me of Frog Machine.
And people who live in a given area are completely subservient to the lords that own their respective castles and fortifications. This isn't entirely dissimilar to what would happen in an anarcho-capitalist society. And I'm really, really curious what mechanisms make capitalism less coercive without a state acting as an intermediary force between you and businesses.
So I'm shocked to hear your commitment to money and materialism, because I don't live an ascetic lifestyle, but I really do.
This dude is such a bad debater. Good lord. These are not hard points to respond to.
Disagree with your focus on money and materialism.
This is a pivot. We're not addressing the question.
No. I'm going to get to it though, but to me, it's ethics is more of a prime.
He's a libertarian. He doesn't care about ethics. He defines his ethics as capitalism. He literally defined his ethics as capitalism at the beginning.
A primary nature.
This dude makes capitalism
here, and
this dude makes capitalism an axiom, and he can't defend it because capitalism is not an axiom.
There's never been an incidence of removing the state. We could make analogies about cancer and say there's never been an evidence.
Yo, a state's never been removed and had something bad happen, so that means it's good to remove the state for sure.
Evidence, of cancer being good for a human body, and this would be a better way of looking at government to say that the introduction of coercion takes us away from this ideal state of creation of value, and everything that you're saying that is an ill of capitalism. It really comes down to this difference in definitions, where you define capitalism as this thing that is backed up by the state. And I mean, I really want to go back to this premise.
Every criticism on levying continues to exist with no state.
Every criticism, what?
Every criticism I'm levying here continues to exist in the society you're proposing, without a state. That's what I'm asking you. Why would the absence of a state make capitalism less coercive?
Because capitalism is, by definition, not coercive in the way that I am defining it.
That's not wait. You can't just definition your way out of that question. If a person now,
this is again the heart of our difference of definitions. Is that
this isn't a definitional difference. You're not answering the question.
Well, no, because I'm including in my definition of capitalism that you own yourself, that the ownership of a human being.
That's irrelevant. This is
the
tautological circle talking that libertarians engage in to avoid dealing with the real world repercussions of their arguments. So let's talk about it. Right now, in our society, which is market-oriented, if you don't like using the term capitalist, there are exploitative forces on the average person. They have to do certain things or they don't get to enjoy a certain quality of life. They're forced into doing some things. How would this change in an AnCap society?
That's life. You have to do
wait. So your
stuff.
Argument is that there is just going to be exploitation no matter what? You're not saying it wouldn't be exploitative?
No. See, now you're changing the question. You didn't use the word. The way you phrased it was not with the word exploitation.
Coercion.
You said that you're going to have to work. You said you're going to have to work to enjoy a quality of life. Yeah, that's how life looks.
Okay, I think.
Sure.
Okay, wait. So you have to pay taxes to enjoy quality of life.
But rent seeking is a product of government. Being able to work or being able to get value without putting in effort or value is a product of is this rent seeking concept that is a product of statism.
Okay, then taxes are just a part of life. If you want there to be basic necessities that everyone can enjoy, taxes are just a part of life. You need to fund those somehow. They get taken if you decide to work.
Well, sure, but there's a better way. Yeah, but there's a better way than that.
I feel like I'm not getting any value out of watching this video. It's terrible. Holy crap. Grisio Lepis says, Vaush's definitions are so dumb. I remember that he defines coercion as A requires B. If there is ever A requires B, it is coercion. Yeah, it's exactly. If you're on a desert island and just need, like, a coconut, he would basically say, this coconut is using force on you because it requires that you crack it open to eat it, or something stupid like that. Like these are the sort of weird definitions he has of force. Pessimistic idealism. Whenever we say something is mine or something is yours, a relation between subject and object is implied. If the quote the subject is the subject's object, then we are caught in a paradox because the subject and object are not identical. They can't be without a contradiction, i.e. the person having two selves. The subject is the self, while the object is the not self. That is how you avoid the vicious regress. No, because I think there has to, like, the subject can't be something apart from an object. That doesn't make sense. Like, everything in existence is objective. Like, everything in existence is an object. Like, existence exists. You can't have a subject that's also not part of existence. That seems to be what you're implying here, and that doesn't, from the way that, that doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense. You can't have a subject apart from existence. You're sort of trying to separate consciousness from existence, but Like, consciousness exists in reality. It's something real.
Like, we can have a voluntary system that achieves the same things without all those perversions.
That system not impose coercive measures on the workers of its society?
Wait, I'm saying a voluntary system. If it's voluntary, where's the coercion? Like, are you implying some other definition of coercion?
Let me ask you let me ask you a basic question, okay? Let's say that you are on a plane, and that plane crash lands on an island, okay? There are only a few survivors. In fact, there are only 2. And you wake up after the first one does. By the time that you have woken up, the other survivor in this plane has claimed all of the coconuts on all of the coconut trees, stacked them on their pile, sheltered that pile with all the wreckage from the plane, and declared they own it. And they say that they would be willing to give you said coconuts if you throat their cock. Now, would you consider that...
This is actually something that I think... I know Peacock talks about this, but I think James Elias makes a reference to it in one of his videos. And basically, the thing is, this is why you need a concept of egoism prior to capitalism. Because when you sort of frame capitalism in this like abstract, no-force sort of way, you get to these weird lifeboat scenarios. And now there's an answer to this, obviously, because it's like a possible thing that exists in reality. But this is, first of all, let's just say this is a lifeboat scenario. This is not a daily thing. You're not going to, every day there's not going to be, you wake up on a desert island. It's just you and one other person, and that one other person has all the coconuts, and the only way to get those coconuts is if you give them deep throat. And that's not reality, first of all. And second of all, capitalism, the violation of rights, it's conditioned by egoism. The reason that we don't violate people's rights is because it's not in our self-interest to live in a society where we violate people's rights. People are better off free for us. I'd rather have Jeff Bezos as a free individual creating Amazon and doing those sort of things than have him being my slave and just doing whatever I tell him to do. Like, that force stifles the mind. Force is a problem. Yeah, so the answer to this would be, like, you need to act in your self-interest here. You steal the coconuts in that sense. If you're not able to get them, you steal them.
To be a voluntary interaction. Is that a voluntary interaction?
Okay. So no, I'm actually no. No, Vaush. Thank you for that. That's a great way of getting to the next fundamental, I think, misunderstanding here in terms of a definition of property rights. And I think
but you have to answer the question before you can move on.
I'm gonna get to the coconuts and the deep throating. Don't worry.
But it's yes, no. I just want to know the question answer, and then you can.
Would that be ethical? No, it would be unethical. It would be I'll say then. If the question is, would that be an ethical situation, or would that be coercive?
Would it be voluntary?
Yes, it would be coercive. Well, it would be based on an illegitimate property rights claim, and this is really an essential thing that I'll grant you. A lot of libertarians do miss this.
So would it be voluntary?
Right? And so.
Would it be a voluntary exchange?
That would no, because it is an illegitimate claim to property rights. The same way that the state creates a territorial monopoly on authority.
What's a legitimate claim to property rights?
Mixing your labor with natural resources in the Lockean sense. If it is something that has your labor in it that you have claimed by homesteading or modifying with your labor. And here's the thing.
Wait, but he homesteaded that island.
Will miss. Hold on a second. I'm going to get to that. Because I think this is a really under-examined topic among libertarians, and I would hope that hearing my perspective on this might bring you back to an understanding of property rights that gives you more confidence in voluntarism. Right now, property outside of your body, and even inside of your body, unfortunately, under our current government considering forced vaccinations, is...
Wait, Grisio Leos, you think sex work is real work? Simp.
It's a matter of social consent, right? How much labor can you mix with the soil and how much is required for you to make it yours, right? And if I put up a fence around 1 million acres and say everything in here is mine because I put up a fence around it, I mix my land, you'd be like, no, bullshit. I don't think so. That's not, no, you can't just put up a fence around it and claim it. But here in northern Arizona, I bought 11 acres and I put up a fence around it and I'm using it. And generally speaking, society respects that as an illegitimate.
Or yeah, you need to use your property to have a claim to it. That makes sense. It's not terrible. I mean, I'm not a legal scholar, so I can't talk about these sort of things very well.
Or as a legitimate individual claim to natural resources, because I'm able to put it to use. I'm able to actually create value with this. But if it were to be abandoned, then it would go back into its unclaimed state. Now, one of the other things here about use of property, a lot of people ask libertarians, but who will build the roads? And the question, as you know, isn't so much who's actually going to build them, but how do we manage shared property? How do we manage infrastructure of a geographical nature? And here it's really setbacks and easements. And you can't build all the way up to the edge of your property in a way that would impede your neighbor's access to their property. Now, here, this consensus of, hey, you don't build within 30
we
feet
are
of the
going
edge of your
so
property.
far off. Wait, can we take this one time?
This gets to property rights. So when you, I told you I was getting to the coconuts and the deep throating. Don't worry. So if this is my legitimate claim here, and I'm not using my property to limit another human being's right, and this is an inherent right that a lot of libertarians don't adequately consider, is that you have a right to equitable access to natural resources, to homestead unused property. And that being respected would mean that if two people are on an island, there is an incumbent right to equitable access, and one person can't say, I own the entire thing, and use that as an excuse to push the other person off the island.
All right, so do you then have an issue with the idea of owning multiple businesses because you can't possibly work at any one business at any given point in time?
I own multiple businesses. I own
Wait, do you work
Big
personally
Igloo
at all of them?
Geodesics. I own Big Igloo Geodesics, and I own Adam versus the Man, and I own the Freedom Line.
Okay, and
yes, I work personally in all.
Do you think it's ethical for a businessman to own multiple businesses where they don't actually contribute to the labor of all or even any of those businesses? It was
what is Georgism?
In and of itself,
That's cringe. Society is cringe, man. And anytime you see a definition that includes the word society in a political ideology, it's usually cringe. Oh, man. Bernie Sanders calls out and exposes media for unfair election coverage.